Hello, dear students. Today I will discuss on the topic vernacular press in India during company rule. The origin of vernacular press in India dates back to 1818 when William Carey, Joshua Mausman, and William Ward of the Serampur missionaries started the first vernacular press in India. The first Bengali as well as the first vernacular press was Samachar Darpan, published by Serampur missionaries from May 23rd, 1818. It began as a monthly but soon converted into weekly. The Serampur missionaries had also started another journal, Digdarshan, in June of the same year. Gangakeshwar Bhattacharya was regarded as the first Indian to have started the vernacular newspaper in Bengali language, and its name was Bengal Gazette, which was started in the year 1818. The first Gujarati newspaper, the Bombay Samachar, was started on July 1st, 1822. The first Hindi newspaper, the Samachar Sudha version, was started in 1854. Numerous language press emerged afterwards in all the different languages of India, but the most prominent Indian languages in which the growth was witnessed were Hindi, Marathi, Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Urdu, and Bengali. The liberal attitudes of a few governor generals of the company helped the press in India to grow gradually. The likes of Metcalfe and Lord William Bentinck had contributed to this regard a lot. For instance, the liberal attitude of Lord Bentinck had encouraged the growth of newspaper vernacular press. The total of 16 Indian language newspapers were published alone in 1830. They were as follows: in dailies, Prabhakar, Chandrodaya, and Mahajan Darpan; in tri-weekly, Vaskar; in bi-weekly, Chandrika, Rasraj; in weeklies, Gyan Darpan, Pangdut, Sudharanjan, Gyan Sacharini, Rasa Sagu, Rangpur Bartavau, and Rasamudgar; in bi-monthlies, Nitya Dharmamanarajika and Darpan Daman Mahanaban; in monthly, Tattabodhini. In Bombay, the Mumbai Vartaman was started in September 1830 by Nauroji Darabji Chandaru, and in the following year, the Jam-e-Jamshed was started by Prashantji Menkaji Motiwala. Dadabhai Nauroji started the Rast Gaftar in Bombay as a fortnightly newspaper on November 15, 1851. The story of these newspapers was only the start of the growth of vernacular press in India. In later years, several such vernacular newspapers emerged, and many of them challenged the foreign occupation in India. Now, the conditions and features of Polish language press in India. The language press in India had severe difficulties for survival because throughout British India, as they were the target of the government on most occasions. The conditions and features of language newspaper were sole ownership. Generally, a vernacular journal was the product of a single handed effort. They had the same person as an editor, owner, and publisher. These editor proprietors all over the country, working on their own, not only managed their newspapers but also wrote nearly all the articles in them. As most of these papers were no more than double sheets, except the few very enterprising ones which went up to as many as 6 sheets. Another feature was multilingual editions. The most striking features of the Indian press in its early days would seem to be its enormous variety. Most numerous of all were the vernacular newspapers, unilingual, bilingual, and some even trilingual, owned mostly by Indians. Then there were the Anglo vernacular journals with columns in English, a fashion of the forties and Bengal, spreading soon afterward to other parts of the country. Although a vernacular newspaper was usually published in the language of the region to which it belonged, almost every region published at least one newspaper in other vernacular language. Another feature was no priority on editorials. As compared to modern times, wherein editorials have a tremendous impact as it reflects the media house's position. An editorial was of less importance in those days. A journal took its stand on an issue through the many articles it wrote on the subject. Vernacular journals of the 70s acquired fame or notoriety based on the articles they published and the names of the men associated with those articles and not on the way their editorials were set. Another feature was meager and unpaid content contributors. The external contributors on the vernacular press in those times were a rare affair. The few contributors were mostly well known personalities of the time. These contributors never contributed for money but for sharing their ideas and opinions. Indeed, there was little chance of their ever being paid. They wrote either as friends of the editors on being desperately requested to do so, or some wrote out of a missionary zeal to take up a position on controversial issues. Another feature was limited circulation. Most of the vernacular newspapers had a hand to mouth existence. High postal rates tended to limit their circulation to local or nearby areas. Sometimes enthusiasm for a cause led the managers of papers to distribute several copies of each issue for free. Sometimes journals failed to continue only because their subscribers discontinued payment. A general estimate of the state of the vernacular press made in 1873 gave us about 1 lakh readers of native papers, with the highest circulation for any one paper of about 3,000. Dependent on aids. Many newspapers depended on aid from local rajas, wealthy and philanthropic citizens and friends, and indeed the government. The local government subsidized several vernacular journals in northern India, though only a few in Bengal and Bombay. Their subsidy consisted of subscribing to a certain fixed number of copies of the journals concerned. Most of the copies were then distributed by governments concerning among Jilla schools and offices. The schoolmaster, the honorary magistrate, or the local leader may be the only actual subscribers, but the content are read aloud and discussed in the long evening to an extent that makes the effective circulation very much larger. On the readings of the Vernacular Press Bill in 1878 in the Viceroy's Council at Kolkata, one of the points most emphasized was the danger of these vernacular papers being commonly read out in the bazaars. Another feature was hostility with the government. Hostility with the government was a normal affair of the vernacular papers, as at many times the newspapers had to fight liberal suits brought by the government against the owner editor. The legal battles they fought with the government took a huge toll on their monetary affair, as a huge amount of money went to this end. The last feature was unsophisticated printing technology. The process of printing these vernacular sheets was yet in its infant stage during the earliest times of press history in India. A lot of it was lithography, especially in the north, where the Urdu script was well suited to lithographic form. The wooden hand press was prevalent to some extent in Bengal. Bombay was the most advanced of the times, as its first vernacular paper, Mumbai Samachar, was printed on the press. In conclusion, the vernacular press in India had a very tough ride throughout the history of colonial India, as they were at the receiving end of various government repressions with numerous legislations and penalties directed towards them. However, the issues they faced were not limited to government repressions, but they did go through several other issues for their survival. Their survival was dependent on various other factors beyond their control. For instance, the newspapers published in Bengali had abundant support from the Bengali population of Kolkata, whereas the newspapers published in other Indian languages like Hindi and Persian from Bengal hardly had any readers. When government assistance was withdrawn from these newspapers, they were closed down as they hardly had any sales to survive. Particularly, the earliest print media in India was driven by the issues about social reform, religious propagation, and commercial interest, and they were the prime motives to start journalism in Indian languages. For the social reform, Raja Ram Mohan Roy can be taken as an example, and for the commercial interest, Bombay Samachar can be taken as an example. Although in the later stages, they were started solely for the propagation of the freedom struggle.